I'm Dalton.
And I'm Wells.
And we are Four Color Media.
Welcome to Southern Fried Geekery.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Southern Fried Geekery podcast. This is episode 84, and as always, I am Caleb Alexander McKinsey.
Matt Trogdon.
I'm Craig. Lance.
I'm Sean.
I'm Jerry.
Awesome. We're all here today. It's nice. Jerry, we missed you last week. You were away in the woods.
Yeah, roughing it with, my Netflix and my portable fan.
You were glamping.
Yeah.
You were glamping. So,
100%.
I mean, it begs the question, does a Jerry shit in the woods?
I do not.
You don't?
No.
No?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
You just hold it
maybe
all
in the
weekend?
lake. But
Ooh.
no, I'm just kidding.
Did you hold it all weekend?
Jerry
Yes,
wasn't the only
all
thing
weekend
floating in that
long.
lake.
The bathroom visit that last Sunday was epic.
Just blow it up. Did you rock the mortar off of the stone walls? All right. Well, how's everybody doing this week?
I'm alive.
Yeah.
I miss Stephanie. She's been at a convention at Gen Con in Indianapolis working since Wednesday, so I've barely heard from her at all.
Yeah.
Because she's got so many meetings and play tests and stuff like that to do. So I've been trying to make the most with my time.
Right.
And I've been getting caught up in a lot of stuff, reading and watching stuff. I watched All the Boys yesterday.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Good show.
Yeah.
Yep. Been a good week. Started drawing again, and thanks again to all of our listeners who submitted requests. I appreciate it.
Very cool. Matt, you did not have the greatest of weeks.
Yeah, it was a blur. Literally, it was a blur. But I'm back on track now, so catching up.
Got both eyes again.
Yeah, I got both eyes firing. So
Awesome. Well, we are going to. This is a news episode for those of you who are at home.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
No, it's
Back
not.
it up.
No.
This is.
I'm like, I am not prepared for news.
No, this is a listener question episode for those of you who are listening at home who are wondering what we're going to be about the business of today. If you wonder how you can eventually get one of your questions on the show, you can come to our Facebook page where we have a thread set up for you to drop your questions at. It's easy. You just put it on there, and then we try to answer it on the show to the best of our abilities. Now, that being said, our abilities are sometimes questionable. So we'll see how this goes. But first, as usual, we read some stuff this week. And I know, like Jerry just said, he got caught up on some reading. And so what we like to do is to kick off our show is to tell you about our short stacks, 3 books that we read this week. So Jerry, since you did catch up on some reading, why don't you go first, bud? Tell me what you read.
I've been getting caught up in a manga series called One Punch Man. I think Sean and I may have talked about it at one point on Manga.
Yeah, we definitely brought it up on the show.
Yeah, it's essentially it's by this mangaka and that goes by One, and the art is by Yusuke Murata. It's essentially about this character who wanted to be a superhero just for fun. Trained so hard that his hair fell out, and he is overpowered and can beat any villain with one punch.
Is that what happened to you, Matt?
Not to be confused with Caleb's One Stroke Man. Another thing that I read this week, the last Sayuki, chapter 21 by Daijiro Nonoue. This has been a pretty good series. I've been enjoying it for the most part, but this last chapter, they got like into some real feels with the main character talking about his parents' backstory and everything, and how tragic things were. It was really heartfelt. Really, got all up in my feels.
Good chapter.
And in the comic side of things, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man number 9 came out this week. You got Tom Taylor writing, and arts by Juan Cabal and Ken Lashley. Fantastic series. I can't praise it enough. This issue was actually told the origins of the Rumor character that they introduced earlier on, which is at first you thought was like an elderly woman that lives in Peter's building. Turns out she's so much more than that, and she was like experimented on, kind of like I think it was the Japanese government. They were trying to make super soldiers like Captain America, and she was the result of that. And her backstory actually kind of touched on that she spent time in the American internment camps and everything like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
Right,
it was a really, really interesting issue, and interesting to see her background and what all she has been through since then. But yeah, those were my 3.
That's the hotness. Craig, what'd you read this week?
I read American Carnage #9 by Brian Hill, Leandro Fernandez, and Dean White. Pretty satisfying conclusion to the story. The art left me a little bit perplexed in a couple of spots, but the story wrapped up about the only way that story could have wrapped up, in my opinion. Avengers #22, Jason Aaron, Stefano Caselli, and Jason Keith. It had Damon Hellstorm, Johnny Blaze, and a possessed Dodge Charger. Do I have to say anything else about this book? Bone Parish #11, Colin Bunn, Jonas Scharf, and Alex Guimares, I think is how you say his name, for that amazing battle scene in it alone. It was John Wick-ish.
Yep. How about you, Sean? What'd you read, buddy?
This week I read Runaways, #23 from Rainbow Rowell, Andres Genelit, and Matthew Wilson. This was a fantastic issue showing a lot of the relationships between a lot of the characters within Runaways, especially with Doombot. Which, also a special acknowledgement too that they hired a specific Doombot dialogue artist, Nico Henrichian. Doombot had his own lettering.
Mm-hmm.
Also read Canto #2 from David M. Boer and Drew Zucker. Again, this series is still world building. It's an amazing read. If you haven't jumped on it, I highly recommend it. And also read Batman Last Night on Earth from Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. Another world building thing. It's a post-apocalyptic Batman story I'm really enjoying.
Nice. So I spent some time with a couple different books this week. I read a book called Jeremiah by Kathy G. Johnson. It's out of 1% Press. It's a little OGN. It's fucking weird.
Those are the best OG.
I know, right?
It's very disjointed. Like, it's very quiet. It takes place on a farm, but I don't know if the world exists outside of that. There's a whole. The character is a very quiet boy. He's borderline being molested by his cousin sister that he's not sure who they are, and these are kids. It's a weird book. There's a lot to unpack in this. His dad's an alcoholic, very abusive. There's a stranger that comes.
Sounds
to
like
town.
home.
It's and they grow. It's literally a farm, but there's nothing beyond the borders of. I don't know. It's a weird book, but it's all done in watercolor. The watercolors are gorgeous,
nice.
Stunning. I picked up Death's Head #1 by Teenie Howard, Kei Zama, Felipe Sobrero, and it's out of Marvel Comics. I don't know about you guys. I don't have a lot of background with Death's Head. I don't know a lot about that character. This book caught me off guard because it was amazing. I had very low expectations. But the art was killer, had a very Dana Warren Johnson vibe to it. The colors were on point. And Teenie Howard just she took a left turn somewhere and just took it off into a really weird, funky place. And I dug the shit out of it.
That's what they should do with that. So.
Yeah,
It sounds like someone that Matt would know everything about.
my favorite couple in Marvel popped up in there too, and that was fun.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And then
Wait a minute. I thought Midnight and Apollo were your favorite couple.
they're not in Marvel, Matt.
Oh, you said Marvel.
I did.
Whew. Okay.
It's okay, buddy. We're gonna get through this together.
You say so.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say Wiccan and Holcomb.
Yeah, you guessed it.
Nice.
And then last night, a book that I need to bring to Matt, actually, I sat down with a book called Metal Gods, a tribute to Judas Priest anthology, edited by Mark Rudolph and out of Decibel Books. And this is just a collection of little short comics that mostly feature Rob Halford, but they get into KK Downing. The other characters do show up in some of the little shorts. But the cool thing is they also get a lot of other essays from different metal artists who are talking about their first experience with Judas Priest, how they kind of came into loving that band, what Judas Priest meant to them. You get people you get guys from Exodus, you get a couple of the guys from Pantera have stuff in there. It's just really cool. The art in there was funky, all different kind of styles. It was great, man. And as somebody who's a huge fan of Judas Priest, it was great to sit down with that book.
Dude, I'd read the hell out of
Yeah,
that.
I'm going to bring you a copy.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's going to happen. So, what'd you read this week, man?
Well, before I move, I got a question. What's borderline molested? Where's that border?
It's a very thin line. So in the case of the book, when I say that, it's the cousin she's a female, she's younger than him, and she keeps making attempts to engage in a sexual encounter, but he just either can't or won't do it. So like the molestation is there, but I guess the act is not. So that's where I say that he's border like. So yeah, it's a fine line. Again, this is he's. I don't
He's
know.
molesting her with his eyes.
I don't know the politically correct way to say this. He's not necessarily a high functioning child. It seems like I don't know if he's dealing with some autism or if he's just a weird, very sheltered kid who doesn't know what's happening. But it's doing two things. Number one, it's showing how because of the sheltered lifestyle that he lives, he's dealing with a lot of family abuse, and there's a lot of abuse in this family that comes from all over the place that is being funneled down to him. It's also opening up the door because the completion of the act is not there, or I guess the engagement of the act is not there. It's opening up the door that he might not be attracted to girls. So it's doing twofold things. The story is very disjointed. And this is Jeremiah that I'm talking about again. So it's not the best book I've ever read by any means, but it was an interesting story. They're doing a lot of work is being done in a very small space, and so it seems kind of very disconnected. But I think it was supposed to be done that way. So that's why I say borderline, because he wasn't directly sexually abused, but this is also another child that's actually younger than him that's trying to do it. So I don't know. It's a very weird space.
Yes,
it's
it
a very
is.
weird space to talk about.
Yeah.
That Kathy G. Johnson addresses or tries to get into.
Wow.
So yeah, it was out.
Family dynamics are weird to begin with,
yeah.
when you add, different things like that into
it was a strange read. It's not one of those books I sit down and like, oh, this was great. I had a happy time with this book. No, it's the kind of graphic novels that I like.
I was going to say you rarely read graphic novels that at the end are happy.
Right. It tries to deal with humanity on the level of truth.
And then Jerry brings us up with Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Lifts our spirits.
Right.
So I read my short stack. I read Captain America number 12. Of course, that is from Marvel, with Ta-Nehisi Coates, Adam Kubert, and Matt Milla. So the ending of this one was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many people are reading this book, but should I spoil the ending?
Yeah,
Should
go
I
ahead.
skip it? So
We don't care. Spoilers.
So Captain America has gone through some heavy stuff lately, and now his image has been damaged to the public eye. So he's essentially dropping the Captain America moniker, and he is now going to go about and do his thing as Steve Rogers. So what does that mean, and what is he going to be doing, and who's going to be pursuing him, and so on? It's going to get real interesting. This is the first time I've ever been on a Captain America series. For whatever that's worth, given my taste in things. Also read American Carnage number 9. Now, I really liked this series, and I really liked this issue specifically.
Yeah.
The artist, I know you talked about the art. Yeah, there was some panel. There was one panel I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But overall,
Yeah.
the art has been fantastic.
Yeah, throughout the series. That's
Yeah.
why it surprised me to get
Yeah.
to those couple of panels that I was
Yeah.
like, what the heck?
When she faces off against the cop,
Yeah.
those panels are amazing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that one I really like. That'll wrap up. I guess that's the last ongoing Vertigo series right now. I mean, if there are others, I don't know.
I think so. Yeah.
And also read The Batman Who Laughs number 7 by DC Comics, Scott Snyder, Jock, and David Barron. The art's fantastic.
Yeah, it's Jock. That's your 50%.
Just gonna sit over here and file my notes.
Oh, Christ.
Yeah.
Keep trusting that guy, and we keep being let down.
He's not getting any more of my money. God damn it.
Told you so. Told you so. Told you.
That's what I
told you
get.
so.
Good deeds do not go unpunished. I swear to God.
No, but you got to enjoy the art. That's a good thing,
I did.
right?
Shooting back over to Captain America, though, I feel like your last romp probably would have been the series where Punisher was Captain America.
No, I'm not touching that shit. Not hashtag not my Punisher.
That's what it is. Hashtag not my Punisher.
That was a pretty badass run.
Wait, since you did go back to Captain America real quick, he's done this before, right? Where he dropped the moniker and became Nomad?
Yeah, he's done
Or
it
something
where he
like
became
that.
Nomad.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been several times.
It's a bit of a callback. So it's cool.
He's never just opened up and just been openly Steve Rogers.
Only after he came back from the dead.
Yeah, remember whenever he was dead, guys?
Yeah. And this is, again, that series, it's all tying back into Nick Spencer's run and what happened with that. I did.
It's
so
addressing Nazi Captain America.
with the art on that. Because I read this too. Are you on the same page as I am as far as like the last where it showed the shield? Are they going back to like the hologram shield, like the laser? Because it would like look translucent in the art. So I'm like, are we bringing back like the arm like generated laser shield that he had way back in the day?
Yeah.
How do you throw that?
Maybe don't do that.
Yeah, that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see where it goes. Well, those are good books, man. I always like to find out. It's always because normally we only talk about one book, but it's always nice to find out like what we're reading in depth. So that's why I like doing the short stacks. They're fun stuff. But we don't always just do short stacks. We always go in depth on at least one comic on this show. And this week we are opting to give a kind of a repeat performance from last week in a way. Last week we did House of 10 #1, and this week we're going to talk about Powers of 10 #1. And I probably should have said this before we did the short stacks, but this is a review show. So if you haven't read this comic, you hit the little pause button, come back and go read it, come back and see it when we get done with it. Or when you get done with it, I should say. We're done with it, hopefully.
I hope all 5 of us are done with it.
I'm not sure I'm done with it.
I don't know that I'll ever be done
I probably
with
need to read it again. But so we are going to spoil some things. So if you don't mind spoilers, that's great. Hang in here with us. If you do mind spoilers, like I said, just come back, revisit this after you've read it, because it's the goodness. And I am going to actually hand this over to Craig. Craig really wanted to.
What?
Yeah, Craig really
I'm
wanted
not
to
prepared
do
for
the
this.
review for this. So,
Yeah, so obviously, we're Powers of X. It's written by Jonathan Hickman. If you don't know that, I don't know what you're doing listening to a comic book podcast. It's penciled by R.B. Silva. Inks are by R.B. Silva and Adriano Di Benedetto. I don't know how to say that name.
Exactly how I would have said it.
And colors by Marte Gracia. And of course, it was lettered by VC's Clayton Cowles because he's doing 98% of all comic books right now. So this book starts with a very interesting page, and we find out why it's actually called Powers of 10 and not Powers of X. It starts off with a page that has Charles without his helmet on, and it's got the X or 10 to the power of 0, and we're told that this is 0 year, and it's the dream. And then we go to the next panel, has Charles with his helmet on, and it's 10 to the power of 1, which is 10 years after the dream, which is our current timeline. And then we have the 10 to the power of 2, which is 100 years, which has a picture or drawing of Lesser Nimrod. We find out later that's who it is. And this is the Man-Machine War. And then we have 10 to the power of 3, which is 1,000 years in the future, which is the Ascension, and a drawing of the Librarian. And Matt, you actually came up with some pretty good ideas as to what all 4 of those represented, if you'd like to share that with us.
So after reading the book and then looking back at those panels, what that seemed to establish to me is you have 4 different stages. There's 4 different stages within this story. X to the power of 0 being called the dreams, essentially where Charles is inspired to start accumulating mutants to bring them all together with the idea of utilizing mutant power. X to the power of 1, 10 years after the dream, where Krakoa is established. This is to further mutant power, to actually move it forward and utilize it for mutant safety and, if needed, aggression. X to the power of 2 being 100 years later, the Man-Machine War. Nimrod wants to take possession of mutant power to use it to man-machine's own ends. And then X to the power of 3 being 1,000 years later. This is well after the war, but that collection of mutant data and mutant power is essentially, of course it's called the library, and that is where what seems to be an alien race is now studying that mutant power for possible use.
Yes. It's either a alien race or a mutant, but we'll get back to that here in a minute. So then after this page, it goes and starts at year 0 for us. And it tells us this. And And Charles is sitting at a fair on a bench, and a woman comes and approaches him. And we find out in a few minutes that it's actually Moira McTaggart. Gosh. She obviously seems to know Charles and eventually tells him that, but he doesn't remember her. And we don't know why. The next book is subtitled The Curious Case of Moira X, so I figure that's when we're going to find out how she knew Charles. And then during their conversation, he tells her that he has a plan, a dream, and that purpose is making him a very happy person. And she tells him that it isn't a dream if it's real, Charles. And then reveals that she knows who he is. During their conversation, she talks about on her way over there, she saw a fortune teller that read her 3 cards. And those 3 cards were the Magician, the Devil, and the Tower. We will find out who those all refer to here as the story goes on. After this little section, it skips forward to 10 years and kind of ties back into the House of 10 that we read last week. And it has Mystique meeting with Magneto and telling him that their mission was successful despite losing Sabretooth, who did not help the situation by killing guards. And she then tells Charles that she's going to need more for what she brought to him, and he informs her that they are all going to have to give something as he takes the thumb drive from her hand telekinetically, which I did not know he had that power.
That's a new thing.
Yeah, he's never used telekinesis before that I remember.
Yeah,
always telepathic, but never telekinetic. So he just basically takes it from her and tells her, I don't really care that you want more. You're going to give us what we want if you want to live here in this better world we're creating. And you kind of get that first little feel of subversion that you have between Magneto's group and Charles's group, that maybe they aren't all on the same page, but they're going to try to work together for the betterment of mutant kind. Then it skips forward to 100 years, X to the power of 2, and this is where, to me, this story really kicks off. We see a dead mutant who has just been killed by the man-machines, which are apparently some sort of cyborg combinations of humans and machines. It is unclear how much humanity remains in the man-machines at this point. The dead mutant has wiped their mind to prevent the man-machines from being able to use their memory against the other mutants. We will find out why that's important here in a few. Because, Hickman has layers upon layers upon layers. Then it switches over to another mutant that is named Silobel, who was captured by the man-machines. We find out she was born in something called the kennels, and the kennels, which we will find out, were breeding grounds used by the man-machines to create hounds to hunt the other mutants, using mutant DNA. Then we find Rasputin and Cardinal, 2 other mutants, who are arguing over whether they should go and try and save Silobel or not. Rasputin goes against Cardinal's judgment and attempts to save Silobel. She appears to have the powers of many different known mutants from the past. Cardinal, to me, looks like a red version of Nightcrawler.
Yeah. Yeah, he definitely is. And
yeah,
or was it Azazel?
Oh, it's a mix of Nightcrawler, Azazel. There's some other
which
stuff.
Azazel was his dad, is Nightcrawler's father.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and then she's just a conglomerate of all kinds of different...
which they really break it down for us here in a minute. But yeah, it's she's really powerful. During this battle, it becomes very clear that Rasputin is the magician from the cards from Moira's fortune telling. Now, why this was Moira's fortune, we don't know yet. I think that's going to be part of what plays out in Moira's tale in the House of 10. And despite Rasputin's best efforts, she can't save Silobel and is forced to retreat, leaving Silobel to be taken. Now we finally get to the first one of Hickman's information pages that he has here. and he tells us about the Sinister breeding program. And finally, we are able to start putting together a timeline for mutant history. Year 0 is the dream and the creation of the X-Men. Year 10 is Krakoa. We learn that in House of X number 1 that those pods, where we saw X-Men or mutants being born out of, was actually Charles using some sort of systemic propagation to make mutants. Now, whether that was cloning or some combination of normal propagation mixed with
The
Krakoan seeds or what, we don't quite know yet. You look like you have a theory.
There's a lot to go through here.
Yeah.
So I'm actually going to hold any comments I have till we're done.
Okay. So to me, that's why they're hatching from those pods on page 1. It's whatever this propagation is that he's using. Somewhere along the way, this systemic propagation caused the mutants to become overpopulated, which led to, we are told, evasion, relocation, and confrontation. Well, I'm sure the evasion and the confrontation had to do with evading humans and battling with humans, and the relocation was that they outgrew Krakoa. The mutant leaders go missing or betray the mutants. It is unclear which. And the new leadership directs Mr. Sinister to start a breeding program, which then leads us to the year 100, the Machine Man War. Sinister's line, the mutant breeding program, we get information about that. The first generation has a 0.3% failure rate, designed to be divergent copies of singular, militaristic X genes used as fodder in the war. The second generation has a 1.2 failure rate, has 2 X genes with predictable power sets, and then you get to the third generation, which had a 9.4% failure rate, up to 5 X genes, and we find out that Rasputin and Cardinal are both third generation. Rasputin, we are given her power set. She has the telepathy of Quentin Quire, the living metal of Colossus, the force-filled powers of Gunter Bane, the intangibility of Kitty Pryde, and the healing factor of Laura Kinney, X-23. That's a pretty badass mutant, people.
Yeah.
That is somebody you are not going to do much damage against.
I saw this. I'm like, no, they didn't throw Honest the Untouchable in here. God damn it.
And then Cardinal, we find out, is part of a group of mutants that despite being bred for military service, gave up self-identity and became pacifists. And they all go by the name Cardinal. And pretty much are a group of, they call them priests or something of that nature. They're trying to win this war through peace somehow.
Yeah.
And then we get to the fourth generation, which has a 62.3 failure rate. The entire batch was born with a hive mind and were a systemic failure. They eventually destroyed 40% of the remaining mutants and caused the fall of Krakoa. Afterwards, they committed mass suicide, collapsing Mars and the Sinister breeding pits into a self-singularity. We don't know how that happens yet, but we can assume that that's going to be part of what we see in this story.
Well, and the collective hive mind makes me think of the Cuckoos.
Yes.
And I imagine they played such a heavy role in the first in House of X. I imagine that's got to have something to do with it.
I would assume so. Yeah. Later, it was determined that this failure was caused and put into place by Mr. Sinister, knowing it was going to happen, and then he defected to the Machine Man side of the war, where he was publicly executed for being a mutant.
Yep.
So then it goes back into the story, and we see now the tower from the cards, which is Nimrod the Lesser's tower. It's ascension. It's what the humans have come to believe is the pinnacle of humanity, the mixture of machines and man. They try to interrogate Silo Bell. She won't give them any information at all. And so they tell her they're going to give her a bath. And you're like, well, what kind of torture is that? Well, this, yeah, it's waterboarding to the extreme. They put you in a tube that looks very much like what Luke Skywalker was in Empire Strikes Back in the Bacta tank. Except in this particular case, instead of healing you, it slowly dissolves you over time, taking your memories and all of the data in your body from your genetics and making them readable like as a library.
Yeah.
And you lose all of yourself, but you kind of just stay there in this floating tube forever until you decompose to the point that you're no longer useful. Mm-hmm. So then we get another page that tells us about the kennels, and we find out that the man machines use the kennels to create black brain hounds, which was like their second or third attempt at these hounds. Mm-hmm. And these hounds were designed, they were mutants, but they were designed to turn on mutants. But this design actually became a flaw in their development because they actually ended up turning on the man machines and helping their own brethren, the other mutants, to actually hunt the man machines, and actually became one of the biggest foes of the man machines. Then we go back to Cardinal and Rasputin, and they're coming back from their adventure, their mission.
Yeah.
And they come back and they're meeting with the leadership. And we find out that the leadership is none other than an old-ass Magneto, Logan, Zorn, and no, that is not Groot. That is Black Tom Cassidy. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not going to take credit for that because I actually had to look it up. And Black Tom's power set comes from being able to generate power through wood. That's why he always carried a shillelagh. And at different times, he's been able to turn his hand into wood and so forth to direct the power through that. So he now looks like a combination of a human and Groot. Mm-hmm. Obviously, he's just continued to develop as both Bobby Drake and Beast have, their mutations.
What's also interesting to kind of point out is what color Magneto's wearing.
Yeah.
Because it's very Polaris.
It is very Polaris. So Craig and I, we were talking about this the other day, and we have differences of opinion. I don't think this is Logan as we know it. I don't think this is Magneto because this is 100 years. Right. This is 100 years after.
Well, we know that Logan has long life and slow aging.
Right.
It would be the ingenious way to solve the problem of Magneto's origin if he has long life and is able to live for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Slow aging.
Well, no, for sure. My only thing is looking at this, we are talking about an era where there's clones and there's mixtures of different ones. Mm-hmm. And, this Logan is blonde. I don't think this is great.
I don't think he's blonde.
He's great.
This Logan looks... It looks blonde to me, but
you're reading it wrong.
I possibly that's fair, but I think this is a
it could very well be clones. I tend to believe that it's the originals that they have been in hiding for whatever reason, and they're directing traffic from because the first thing Logan tells her is, well, the old man is waiting for you. So I'm assuming the old man is Charles, and they're going to take them to Charles we're going to see how this battle plays out and how this war plays out. But I do believe when it says the leaders abandoned, it's specifically talking about 4 or 5 specific leaders that are still alive by the time they get to the war.
Maybe. Possibly.
So then we find out on another information page, which Hickman's really big on in this, which is the only way you can try and piece this together at all. If you're skipping the prose pages in this, you're not going to get this story. You're going to be really confused. So we find out that there's 10,000 about mutants left alive. 7,942 are on the Shi'ar homeworld of Benevolence. 1,829 are on the Shi'ar homeworld of Chandalar. And there were 10 left alive on asteroid K in the solar system, but now there is 8 after Silo Bell and the other mutant died in the first page. Then we get to 1,000 years in the future, and the librarian is now talking. We see the librarian, which you said you thought it was an alien. I think it's a mutant. Talking to Nimrod the Greater, who is, of course, a machine, or a man machine, presumably. The that was created to catalog the events of the man-machine war and calculate the best strategy to win the war for the man-machines, but when the war suddenly and surprisingly ended, that strategy wasn't needed, so Nimrod has just been there maintaining the library for all this time. The librarian is studying one of the baths from the war, and in that bath, to me, it appeared to be Silobel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the information is degrading and is no longer useful. And the librarian points out the preserve where they house artifacts of the Homo sapiens era, and pray to God that they will never have dominion again. And then it goes into the preserve, and you see a man and a woman. You see a flash of light, and then a man and a woman. Mm-hmm. But it's unclear whether they are actually alive or are they some sort of statues. I tend to think it's humanity being reborn in there. But
it's a zoo.
Very
It's a habitat. There's a biodome habitat.
Yeah.
That's what I assumed.
Yeah, and what it very much reminds me of is those first pages of House of X, where the people are hatching out of little bio bubbles.
Yeah,
like I think that's what we actually saw there. Like this is all some type of weird loop.
Yes,
that's jumping around.
See, I figure that the somehow the mutants came up with something to win the war, surprisingly win the war. And now the mutants are in charge of the world. Mm-hmm. And I felt like the librarian was a mutant, but she does look very alien. But it's hard to tell with mutants; they could be alien. They could.
I think that's the point.
We don't know yet. Yeah, we don't know what the librarian is yet. So, other than a blue woman.
And I mean, you're dealing with, like they said, that they're hanging out in space. They're dealing with Lalandra's people. This could be any mixture of. I mean, this is a world in which genetic overlap is rampant. They're doing all kind. I'm sure genetic testing didn't just work into the mutants. You also live in a world where man and machine have fused as a reaction to the mutant threat that happened the 10 years after.
One thing that I find very interesting is in this timeline, the X-Men have existed for 10 years or less by the time we're in the current timeline. But yet, by the time we get to the current timeline, Scott's very well known. So, the X-Men have been doing something because Scott's very well known by the Fantastic Four, has a relationship with them. You have that banter back and forth. Franklin's been born and is presumably, teenager years. So, mutants are still being born naturally at that point, as well as...
Well, we don't know if that first panel was a time jump we're looking at. Were we looking at the Mars pits in that picture?
Oh, in the first page of
we
House
don't know.
of X?
Yeah.
I would assume that he would have put the little X to the power of up there, but you don't know.
Well, you can't necessarily trust that either because there was how there was a misprint in the last book?
Yeah, I know.
There was a misprint in this book. They put X to the first when it should have been X to the second in one of the spots. So you can't really, look, it's a formatting error. You can't really trust it. So just kind of go by what the art's telling you, in my opinion.
But you kind of have to. But, it's all going to play out, but right now there's so many questions, and the only person that can satisfy those answers for me is Jonathan Hickman.
Yeah.
That's why we keep coming back to the book.
Yeah. That best X-Men stuff I'm reading in years.
Just one more thing I just kind of wanted to throw out here with the four that we saw in the future here with Black Tom Cassidy. Could he also be combined with Krakoa?
Very possibly.
He could be.
I mean...
I kind of get that vibe.
Again, we don't know if it's actually Tom Cassidy or if it's a genetic version.
Well, in the House of X, you also saw Zorn meditating with another Zorn. Yeah. So, there's a weird thing happening.
It's possible he could have had a Swamp Thing where Swamp Thing. Where his body was destroyed, but his consciousness lives on in a Krakoa form. Right. Yeah.
Very possibly. Like I said, there's a lot in this book. So what did everybody think of it, especially in comparison to House of X? I like House of X better, but I think that's because it's more of a straightforward story. To me, what Jonathan Hickman here is doing is the same thing he kind of did with his Avengers run. New Avengers was the straightforward, here's just one kind of narrative, and the Avengers book that he was doing was the larger, broader picture that you needed to add context to the world at large. I think he's kind of doing that with this, except Powers of X is not the world at large; it's time at large. Which it's X-Men, so you got to throw there's no time travel actually happening here, but there is a whole lot of timey-wimey stuff.
Yeah.
So
And they've got so many alternate X-Men timelines too. And it's interesting to see how they're throwing this one together and how the mutants are combinations of all these other mutants that we know.
Yeah.
So it's you're trying to oh, well, whose kid is this or whatever, but that's not the case. It's oh, whose DNA is mixed in with this person.
Sean?
This was definitely a lot more to digest than House of X for sure. And that's not a bad thing because House of X got us set up, and I think Powers of X is showing the scale of what he's wanting the story Hickman's wanting to tell us. But yeah, I mean, jumping through timelines can always get very confusing, leaves a lot of interpretation. I think that was an intentional move by him for sure. But yeah, I think I agree with you though. I think House of X was a lot more kind of a condensed story and I enjoyed that a bit more, but this book posed a lot of questions that I can't wait to find out the answers to. Okay. So, yeah.
Matt, what you think about it, buddy?
Oh, I love this book. I'm all in for what Hickman is doing here. Mm-hmm. It's pretty incredible what he's doing with the two different approaches he's taking to the story itself, and it's super compelling. My gosh, this is a super compelling story.
Yeah, there's so much to digest.
It is. There's so much to interpret on so many pages. It's vague for a reason. We're all sitting here trying to guess what things mean because that's the intention he had. I mean, we keep talking about the very first page of the very first issue, and that was completely intentional. We don't know what that is. It could be at least two different things, and it's like that page after page in this book. That he's slowly going to key us in on later. I mean, the guy knows how to hook an audience, man.
It is like watching a mystery television show and then getting online and going to a forum and discussing what's going on in that mystery show. Who's the killer? Who's doing this? Where you're trying to figure out the layers of this.
While it's unfolding.
And you almost have to take this like a textbook. Mm-hmm. And try to tear it apart and do an outline to try and figure out what is really going on. Because the first time I just did a regular comic book read through it. Mm-hmm. And then I read it again a little bit more. Okay, I need to digest. And then I sat down and I did an outline with it.
Yeah.
And that outline really helped me to kind of put my thoughts in order on it. Because there's so much to digest.
There is. And one of the things I love that Hickman is doing is he's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? He's not just pretending like we don't have all of the, almost 60 years of X-Men continuity. He's playing with it all. The era where, and it's more of a recent era where mutants, they stop being born, where they're no longer existing. He's taking that, he may not be doing it in the time that it was portrayed, but that's exactly why the whole Sinister on Mars things happens. If you read the book, it says when the population level of mutants reached the crisis point, and the constant evasion, relocation, confrontation style made the systemic mutant propagation impossible. AKA, you could not make more mutants. They either weren't being born, or they couldn't make them,
or their DNA had gotten so
it just degraded
out
to the point that they moved, and that's what makes Sinister possible.
So on that point, now I interpreted that a lot different than you guys. Crisis point to me meant low, not high. And that is why the Sinister breeding program was started, to get the population back up again.
No, that's what
it says overpopulation.
Where does it say that?
Maybe I read it wrong.
I read it over and over because I thought I kept reading. I didn't see overpopulation. I just saw crisis point.
Crisis
point, constant. And if you're constantly evading and relocating and then getting into new confrontations, that's going to disrupt any lifestyle, and you're not going to be able to propagate. Think of the Native Americans in the United States, and they're constantly having to relocate to different habitats. They can't establish a lifestyle. They can't begin new families because they're in this constant state of movement. That's what
I did read it as overpopulation, but you might be right. We don't know yet.
Yeah, I reread it because I thought, I don't see overpopulation anywhere in there. It just says crisis point.
Well, I read it as, again, there are no more mutants showing up. So for me, the population wasn't necessarily the problem. It was just that there were no new ones being made, which effectually leads down to lower numbers. Right?
So I
Like
read
if
that
you're-
differently than the two of you. I felt like the population had gotten so big that they had outgrown Krakoa.
I think the population on Mars exploded when after they moved the genetic labs to Mars, because that's what you get, all of these people, and all of a sudden because of what Sinister does, there's an implosion on Mars. I think the diminished population had to have happened on Earth, which is what led to the genetic testing.
Well, there's no one left on. There's no mutants left on Earth.
Yeah.
Who is the genius that was like, hey, let's give Sinister a thing and leave him alone to his own devices?
Well, that's what, and that paints the picture of their desperation.
Yeah.
To me, it's like,
Oh, let's trust Sinister. The dude's name is Sinister.
Yeah.
they thought they could.
Christ's sakes.
I mean, you think you can put your thumb.
You got everybody
Oh,
working
Sinister.
together for the best of the mutant population, is what you think. But I mean, we've already seen a little bit of that divide in the current timeline between Magneto and his group and Charles. It's not a huge divide, but you can see that they're working towards the same goals, but maybe not quite at the same angle as of right now.
That sounds familiar to the
Yes.
X-Men history, doesn't it?
Right, but but he's going to present it to us in a new way. I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Obviously, there's going to end up being a fraction.
Yeah, he's not reinventing the X-Men wheel. I mean, he's used the original motivations of Magneto and Charles are
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
But this also is not the same Charles that we know. Besides the point, like Craig pointed out earlier, to my knowledge, Charles has never had telekinesis. So he's applied some of this to himself. Like he's messed with his own genetics, or it's whatever this weird form of Cerebro is.
He could also be a genetic copy of himself, which is why Moira knows him, but he doesn't know Moira.
There's something to that, but there's also the fact, like, his attitude is not the same. Like the way
he's a little done playing with humanity.
Well, but the way he flips the script on Mystique, where Mystique is, when she comes back and she's got the what do we call it?
Thumb drive.
Thumb drive.
I forgot the name of it.
When she's got that, and before she hands it over, she's like, "I've got demands," because she's Mystique, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty in line with Mystique. Mystique is going to get hers, and Charles just comes out there and is like, "No, you don't."
Yeah, you got demands, but I have more demands than you,
like,
so just get in line.
And he just flips the script on her, and then he turns around and is like, "Your demands don't matter, mine do." And then she's like, "Well," she tries to play his own game. She's like, "Is the good of mutant kind not good enough for you?" And he's just kind of smirks, and he's like, "No."
What he told her was that the overall good of all mutant kind was more important than her own desires.
But what he establishes is, like, the overall good of mutant kind has to fall in line with his viewpoint.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is not the Charles we know. He's always been the middle guy. Like, we can make peace between these two factions. He's not.
Well, we still haven't had his dream revealed yet.
True.
We don't know what his dream is yet. His dream could be an established coexistence with humanity.
Well, so
that's always been his dream.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see, as you said, Hickman's playing in the sandbox. He's not reinventing it.
Yeah.
Well, and what I read into that as well is, Charles is talking to Mystique the way he needs to talk to her. Mystique will run you over if you give her an inch.
Yeah.
So he is establishing some authority with her.
This is not the Mystique and Charles relationship from the current movies, where they're friends. And
those don't.
Thank you.
Yeah. We don't talk about.
Now
that.
we don't ever talk about those again.
But he's essentially holding humanity, at least in the 10 years after. His whole thing is he's holding humanity hostage. That's what House of X established. Is like, no, we're giving you the world, but you need to know it's ours. We'll be on Krakoa. Don't fuck with us.
Yeah.
He's not just trying to create a world where he exists.
He
peacefully.
never said that, though. Magneto said that.
Yeah.
Well, right, but Magneto, in some sense, is the second in command to him. Like, he says, we're following Charles' dream.
Yeah, you don't know that.
We don't know that.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I think this issue showed that they're a lot more in sync than what the first issue of House of X made. It gave us those kind of doubts. But with Professor X, or Charles, at least we'll call him, talking with Mystique, like, he knew about them going in there to steal the stuff, that they're, the criminal activity, which felt very Magneto to me in House of X. Like, maybe that was possibly doing something behind Charles' back, but he's completely in on it.
Oh no, I think he ordered
Yeah.
that.
That's what I mean. Like,
he's giving Magneto orders.
Yeah. So by the way I interpreted, like, I thought there was that possibility that maybe Magneto, because you can't trust fucking Magneto, inevitably will turn on Charles, at least in the history of it. So I thought in House of X, maybe that was kind of a shadow operation that maybe Charles didn't know, but this one completely showed.
You're not going to do it. You're not going to run behind Charles Xavier's back.
Not
this
He's
Charles
an Omega
Xavier.
level.
Well, true, but like I thought maybe they were kind of like the first book I thought was kind of hinting at that, kind of giving that possibility of them doing that kind of dirty work like that, but clearly not. So I think they're 100. I think they're 100% in sync with each other.
Yeah, it's going to be the X-Force team, but I do agree that it shows them working together, and I think Sean's right that you kind of get that vibe in a little bit that, hey, they're working together. I just don't know how on board Magneto is with Charles's dream.
Yeah.
And that's where, when I'm saying I don't know that he's his second in command. He's his number one general right now, but I don't know how on board he is. I think he's playing the game until he doesn't need to.
No, he's going to Starscream him something.
That's what I think is going to happen.
Maybe. I just like this Charles is not afraid of whipping out a big dick.
I agree.
So,
but Magneto's never been afraid of whipping out the big dick. So
he hits you with it.
Yeah. So
it's clad in metal. He just sends it at you.
Charles will show it to you.
So
Magneto will hit it.
There's a lot of story.
Hits you in the side of the face with it.
There's more story that we can get to in just one episode, like especially with what the amount of storytelling that he does between year 10 and year 100. Like that to me is the most fascinating era because especially if you are like I've read previews and it kind of spoiled the concept for me. House of X is the rise of the mutants, Powers is the fall of the mutants.
Yeah.
So that story in there is fascinating. But just to the art on this. I like R.B. Silva. I think he's a fantastic artist. And the art in this, there's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. It's beautiful. It is not, to me, up to the... Like, it suffers from having to follow Pepe Larraz in the last issue because it's not to that caliber. But even judging the book by its own merits, it's also kind of back and forth all over the place. Like, when I opened the book and I saw that first picture of Charles when he's talking to Moira, I was just like, that's not what I want out of it. But then you turn the page and you get some of these other... just depictions of the landscape and the mechanics of it, and it's just like, oh well, he just went up 3 levels.
I think it had to do with inking. There were 2 inkers on it.
Were there? Okay.
Yeah, he
I didn't
inked
notice
some
that.
of his own work, and then somebody else inked. Let me look. I've got the notes here. Adriano Di Benedetto.
That might have a lot
part
to
of
do
it.
with it.
So I think you had some pages that were at a level 10 or whatever level, and some at a level 7. Is because of the 2 different inking.
Mm-hmm.
I think because...
That makes sense now.
Yeah.
Because I was having those moments where I was like, oh, this is really great, and this is not.
Yeah.
Like, what is the...
Now, I don't know who inked what page, to get you the higher levels or whatever, but you had 2 different inkers on it, so...
Very cool. Well, we got any other things we just need or want to throw in there?
Well, there's one thing I would want to say. I'm sorry, Matt. In the last episode, I said that... House of X felt very much like Black Monday Murders to me, as far as not the story, but the density and the way he told the story. To me, this book feels much more like East of West, especially the year 100 stuff.
Yeah, this one does. Yeah,
yeah. The even the art style in it has kind of that East of West, completely different but it has that feel of East of West to me.
I have a question that I don't know if we'll be able to answer it or not, but it was kind of what I wanted to end, at least my part of it on. The Chimeras, specifically the Chimera of Rasputin. Like, we get this conglomerate, who is an amazing character.
My new favorite X-Men.
But she's carrying a soul sword.
Yes, which it didn't touch on in her.
No, because, like,
that's why she's the magician.
So there's a magic there, but the Rasputin part, like, not Rasputin, the part where it talks about, the Rasputin part, where she's actually got Colossus's ability to become living metal. The Soul Sword wasn't Magic's mutant ability. That was her magic ability. Like, that had to do with her being a paragon of hell.
I was thinking about that as well, because it has nothing to do with mutant ability. Maybe at some point we'll get an explanation for it of it being like her being chosen for it because of her bloodline and everything.
That's how I took it.
Yeah,
Maybe.
like it's kind of one of those things that's waiting for somebody to take it
Excalibur-esque,
that's worthy of it. That's exactly what it is.
Ileana started the legacy of the Rasputin bloodline, possibly be able to wield that sword and that power of hell, maybe.
The other thing I forgot to mention was that Cardinal in this book is the devil card.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So I forgot to mention that.
Which, again, you're talking about legacy characters.
Yes, coming, Nightcrawler comes from
Azazel.
And so, he looks more like him, and,
Right.
So yeah, you had all three of those cards play out. Why does Moira get those cards? Of course, we're going to find that out at some point.
And who is Moira? Is this even Moira? Like,
see, it's year 0. So presumably it's at least a version of her, so why Charles doesn't know her is the bigger mystery to me.
Yep.
So
I likes it. I like the building that's going on here.
So much
mechanics
depth.
of it is insane.
I actually like this book better than I liked House of
Did
X.
you really? Okay.
I don't want this book to be my X-Men book once the story is told. I want it to be in the current timeline. But for an event, for world building, and as you said, to give us the fall of mutants, what happens to them eventually, it's a great story. But I do want the X-Men book to be in the current timeline when they get done with this world building
These
that
12
he's
issues.
doing. Yeah.
As far as I really like the art in this book, and the individual panels themselves were more impactful for me. Just the 4 panels between Moira and Charles, just 4 panels of 2 people's faces, was very powerful.
Yeah, one's frowning, one's smiling.
And just that, that was. And there's a lot of panels in this book I really dug, and I never get tired of looking at the skull belt that Mystique wears.
Nimrod being the giddy kid who's like, "Can I do it? Can I do it?" That was great.
Yeah,
even though he's in charge.
Let's talk about how dumb Nimrod looks and how stupid of a name Nimrod is.
Okay, but there's a reason he's named Nimrod.
Yeah,
Nimrod was the king of Babylon,
it's
and it goes with the Tower of Babel.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So that's why he's Nimrod. But yeah.
But yeah, his design is kind of, it's always been a design. I was like, man. But when the Hound, I don't know if you call it a Hound, but it's like the Man-Machine Sentinel that goes after the group, like where it's got the 3 Nimrod head, like that's terrifying. Yeah.
Well,
that's legitimate.
The Hound of Cerberus kind of thing with the 3 heads.
Also, sorry.
No, I was going to say then later you get the Nimrod the Greater, which we don't know if it's just a machine at that point or if it's still a man machine.
Right.
I'm curious to why Logan is wearing the brown and yellow suit and not the classic X-Men suit.
Well, because they've done that a lot in this book, but
they cloned the suit too.
It's just curious the choice there.
He's wearing the blue and yellow in House of X, but in this one he's wearing brown. It's curious. I'm sure there's a reason
for it. He wore the brown pants today.
Yeah.
You know why? Deadpool explained it. Because you shit your pants.
No, he doesn't. God damn it!
He wears brown so no one can see the stain.
You hit your edit button there.
But that's another thing though. That's not just his colors. That's also Sabretooth's colors. That's another thing that makes me think again. Like if you look at all of these characters, they're in some way a combination of things. To me, it could be very well be a combination of Logan and Sabretooth.
No, it's not. No.
I mean, he's a little thicker than Logan is.
No, he's not.
No.
Have you seen the Sam Keith Logan?
Yes, that's true. Anyway, you want to answer some listener questions?
Yeah. Anybody have
that's
any
the
last
only reason
things?
I came here today.
Honestly. Oh, yeah, I know, right?
Anybody have any last things on this before we move on? Because it is a big book, so...
Well, Wolverine is in his geriatric years, brown pants would probably be suitable.
Yeah, you know what? Incontinent.
And scene. Let's go to.
No, I didn't go that far.
I want a 5-issue miniseries called Incontinent Wolverine.
God damn it! Now you're just hurting people,
right? Just messing with our emotions, Matt.
Yeah, it depends. Fucking heathens.
Do they make elderly mutant diapers?
Depends.
It's great. X-Pens. They're expendable. I'm sorry. But dad jokes. I got them all day long. Let's answer some listener questions, guys.
Yeah.
All right, so our listener questions, like I said before, they are given to us in our Facebook group. If you go to the announcements page, we'll always have at least some type of little thread popped up there that say, hey, you have questions, we might have answers, or at least we can discuss what we think the answers are. Drop them here, and we do that. So once a month, or give or take, if there's not weird scheduling issues, we try to get to this. And they're a lot of fun because it's not stuff that we readily think about, I think. Sometimes these things are way out of the wheelhouse.
I always have to think about the answers.
It's good stuff. And also, I really personally, and I think the guys all share this view, I love interacting with everybody who listens to the show. So if you listen to the show, it's kind of how we get to know you. I mean, maybe not Matt, because he doesn't get on Facebook.
So, he hates you guys.
He's just like, who are these people and where do these questions come from? But our first question comes from Mr. Mike Delvecchio. And he says, when it comes to event comics, do you think DC and Marvel would do better to be upfront with the readers as to what is essential to the story, what is peripheral, rather than just saying everything with the event banner is essential reading? Personally, Mike thinks that events would sell better if we knew we weren't in the hole for 20 or 30 issues before even starting. And just to add some context to this, he gave us this question kind of right in the middle of the big Thor event that was going around, War of the Realms, which had a bazillion and 7, I think was the final number, tie-ins. 1 bazillion and 7, all on sale, all at Capel. And
they're all in the dollar bin now.
to answer that,
right.
To answer that question, yeah, for sure. No, and I think that doing less tie-in series is for the better, just because.
Can I debate this with you?
Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, you have to go under the assumption that events aren't selling well, which is not what's happening.
No.
If they weren't selling well, they wouldn't do it.
Correct.
Right.
Now, second of all, War of Realms did not have a bunch of tie-ins. They had a few that weren't already in other books. Mm-hmm. It just crossed over to existing books, which you could choose to not buy or to buy.
Some, like you had the New Agents of Atlas. You had
a few.
All these little teams. They got their own 3-issue. There was, I think, 10 different 3-issue miniseries that spun out of that.
So the answer to that is none of them ever make a difference to the overall event. So unless you're interested in those characters,
for sure.
Don't buy them. I learned a long time ago, Civil War actually taught me this. Mm-hmm. You don't need to buy all the tie-ins. The only crossover books I get are books that I'm already on that series.
Right.
I don't jump over and say, okay, give me all the crossover titles for every book because ultimately it doesn't have any ultimate end to the event. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have any effect on the event.
You say that, but then when you get great things like Frontline.
Which I have a note on here that says, bring back Frontline. Yeah. Do you hear me, Marvel? So, yes, that's what I'm saying. Is on those little mini-series that go with the events, pick and choose the ones you want.
Yeah.
And if people quit buying all of them, they'll start narrowing down to what they think people want more than.
Yeah, I think they've done a lot better by having, like, War of the Realms had it, and a lot of, like, where it's, like, one main title. Mm-hmm. No, I think that's been a good way. Back from, like, say, the 90s, like, one I know I bought was, like, Executioner song back in the day. Because that was, you had to go out and buy, if you wanted to read that whole story, you had to go buy X Factor, X-Men. You had to go buy all these multiple books. They're not doing that as much anymore. So I don't think it's as big of a deal. You have to worry about going outside the Bible to books maybe you weren't buying before. But, it's purely optional. Of course, they want you to, so they're not going to say these aren't important. From a business standpoint, they want you to buy every damn book. But you stick to the main line, read the ones that happen in the books that you're already on, and, if you see something catch your eye, go for it. But I don't think it's as necessary like how it used to be with these big crossovers.
Well, and on that note, so what they're doing over at DC right now with the Year of the Villain thing, I don't particularly care for.
What's the Year of the Villain? See, I'm not even reading any of them.
Yeah, in each, like, random issue of whatever, like, it's their ongoing series, in the back of whatever book has the Year of the Villain little header on there, there's always going to be a 2 or 3 page thing that over the entire line adds up to this mini story that's going into this, whatever this Year of the Villain event is. Each of them are different. If you want the entire story, you have to jump on Deathstroke number 50, whatever.
You know how you can get them all without doing that? Wait about 3 months, and
and they'll put out a
trade
thing.
paperback is going to come out that has all of them collected.
But we have customers, and I'm simply speaking from the retailer aspect. The store that I work part-time at has customers that they call in, hey, can you pull all of these books? No, because or can you put me on the pull list for any of the tie-ins that are going to have this yearly villain story? No, there's no way we can do that because we don't know.
Yeah.
I really hate that DC is doing that because people do want the story, and they haven't came out and said, hey, like, you don't actually have to do this because we are going to. They need to do that officially.
Yeah, and I definitely do prefer the way that Marvel does it now, where they just have one main line.
Yeah.
Because, for the longest time, it was like, hey, we have an alpha issue. And then in between that, you have to get this. That's what they did for Messiah Complex.
Oh, they've done it for a lot of their series.
Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
And I was just like, now I have to go back and figure out what issues individually instead of just going through, War of the Realms and getting issues 1 through 5.
Well, the hard part about that becomes later if you're trying to read the run at a later time.
Mm-hmm.
And you're, okay, I'm going to sit down and read my Green Lantern stuff from Jeff Johns' run.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get to the Sinestro War.
Oh, yeah.
And, okay, but now I haven't been reading the Green Lantern Corps, and it actually jumped back and forth in that story.
Mm-hmm.
So unless you go pull the books from the Green Lantern Corps and mix them in there to read that run, you miss information.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't like that when they do it that way.
Yeah.
And it was kind of funny and opposite for me at that point because I wasn't on the main Green Lantern book.
You were
I was
reading
on
Green Lantern Corps.
And then it got to Sinestro Corp, and I had to go back and buy.
For me, I'd read them all, and I went back to go read the Green Lantern run because it was such a great run, at least the first part of it. And I had to go find all. It just makes it a little more difficult to tie it in.
We should have just combined our collections.
Yeah, just shared books and read together, Jerry.
Gross.
Just stayed up late
touch
and told
my
scary
books.
stories.
Your book is touching my book. That's how you catch it.
They just touch the tips.
But just boiling back down into Mike's question, though, do I think it would be better if any of the publishers took the liberty of saying, this is the main title you have to read. These other ones you can if you want to, but they don't really tie in. On some level, yes, but the whole point of it is this is connected to this thing, and there's going to be at least one thing in here most of the time that carries over. And in the case of War of the Realms, it actually did. There was a lot of stuff, like in the Spider-Man book, that if you were reading War of the Realms, like things happened in there that spun out of these other books. There was a thing that happened with Cinder that spun out of the Greg Pak Agents of Atlas book. Like you had to kind of know what was going on. But
I didn't read those books, and I was never
confused. And you were fine.
Yeah.
And I didn't read the one with the Punisher and everything, and I was fine. I didn't read the Daredevil one.
I didn't read Thor, and I felt like I was a little.
Thor was kind of needed for that one, in my opinion.
That book, it specifically spins out of Thor.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But you're right. In that particular case, if you only read the main event and didn't read Thor, you probably were a little bit confused.
Yeah. Agreed.
Whereas all the other... So again, going back to Mike's question, it would be nice to know that these specifically... because it actually went back and forth without saying Thor issue whatever is part 6 of War of the Realms.
Yeah.
You just had to be reading them as they came out.
And they used to do that. Yeah. Like back in the day when editors actually did editorial notes and stuff like that. They used to, like on the front page where they would give you a synopsis.
They
used
even
to say,
spell stuff right.
I know. The events of this book take place before or directly after this other book. So if you haven't read that, you need to go read
the other.
Don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And I think it's bullshit. And I love it when I do see it in other books where editors actually do their goddamn jobs and earn their paycheck, and they put in there, hey, this happened here. Go read this
reference this issue.
Yeah.
You're in an overall universe. You're an extended universe. You're dealing with stuff that is impacted by what happens outside.
If
Why would
nothing
you not?
else for the event books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do that. Go back to doing that.
Mike, you're right. They need to tell us what is required reading, but I don't know how they do that without just saying buy it all, which is what they want you to do.
Or don't buy this.
Yeah.
Like you don't need to buy this book because that's unfair to the people that they hired to write that book.
It'd be great for the readers, bad for the publisher.
Yeah.
Capitalism. Yay. All right. Question the second. If you could be a character in any comic book universe, which would it be? What other characters would you interact with? And this one comes from our very own, the love of Jerry's life, Miss Stephanie Straw. The apple of his eye. Look at it. He's gleaming. Look at, there's a glow. He's radiant. Matt, we'll start you. Ooh, girls. Yuck.
Mush.
Cooties.
Happy feelings.
Matt, you start us off on this one.
So, boy, this one was tough. I had a lot of characters came to mind. But I couldn't pick my favorite characters because all my favorite characters have a lot of emotional baggage and a lot of torturous pasts. And I was like, yeah, because first I thought, oh hell yeah, Wolverine. Then I'm like, oh god, no, he's tortured. That's a tortured man. So Captain America is who I came up with. He's the only character I can think of that did not have the emotional baggage that so many characters have.
He's probably the one in the best mental
So
condition.
Marvel, you.
Yeah. So now, as far as who he would interact with, I still say I think the X-Men, as far as a collected universe within Marvel, the mutant universe is still the most interesting to me. So his interactions with the X-Men and their motivations, I think that'd be really awesome to be a part of. And the real easy one for people to choose is Superman. The reason I chose Captain America over Superman is what's more compelling to me is he has essentially the character of Superman, but he's got the military and hand-to-hand combat training that I think is so badass. And I always think back to those few panels, I don't remember what book it is, where Captain America has Taskmaster in the chokehold, and the look of fear and surprise in Taskmaster's eyes. I always think of that.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody that has Superman, go change your answer.
Yeah.
Jerry, we'll bounce over to you next. What world and who would you hang out with?
I picked My Hero Academia.
Okay.
Mostly because it's more of like of an advanced superhero world, where this has been around for so many years, so many decades. So it's kind of like a normal thing, and there aren't a fuck ton of villains that are constantly popping up and murdering everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And it just
Boring
seemed like
world.
it would be. I mean, it's definitely not boring. If I could call into work late because there's some kind of incident going on or something like that, then that's pretty cool because it's such a so many.
So what
men
character?
are speaking. Honestly, Class 1A would be cool.
The entire class?
Yeah, any of the pro heroes in the series. Kamuki Woods would be cool too.
Okay.
Definitely not any of the villains that they do have for what's going on right now.
Talk about emotional baggage.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want that.
Yeah. But I think it'd be pretty cool.
Craig, go.
Well, I initially wrote down Luke Skywalker because, it's Star Wars. It has a comic universe. But then I thought that's really not fair because that's really just me, picking.
No, man.
It's a comic.
Yeah,
No,
but
I don't
it's-
like it. I don't like it.
I switched to Batman because he has all the coolest toys. And then to get over the emotional baggage, the first thing I would do would go beat Joe Chill to death. And then I would go hang out with my new friends at the Justice League.
Yeah, but then Batman would arrest you for committing murder.
No, because I am Batman.
Oh,
And then Craig,
I don't agree with Batman's assessment.
You're cheating.
Craig
You can't
not
beat
being
him
from
to death.
Craig
Yes, I
not being
can.
from that world and being
Cheating.
put into Arkham Asylum would become the new Joker. It's an
No,
origin story.
I'm overcoming my emotional baggage.
through pummeling.
through murder.
The murder.
Hey,
what the Punisher does.
I agree with the Punisher in this case.
But that's why I didn't choose the Punisher.
I agree with him in this case. If I kill one, then yes, there's the same amount of killers in the world. But when I kill the second one, now there's one less.
The numbers game. Sean, what
I
world
win.
would you want to live in?
Well, I mean, I think the obvious answer is jungle fantasy.
Well,
Now, shout out to Castro. Kidding. But had to throw that in there. And also, apparently I'm the only one who misinterpreted the question a little bit. I assumed that you were like a character in the world, as in you're still you. Like not picking an existing character.
no, I think that's right.
That's fine.
No.
Either
So,
one's fine.
Okay. I mean, like he picked, like I said,
I read
it's
it the same way you
interpretation.
did, but yeah, Jerry read it the way you're
Right.
reading it.
So I too chose My Hero Academia as a modern setting with an 80% chance I'll be born with a superpower.
Okay.
So, and I would love to actually be a part of the rescue operation that these heroes will become. And I'd want to meet 13, who is one of the big rescue heroes in that series.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I interpreted it the same way you did. If you could be just a
Like you-
character,
like you're just in their
dipped
world.
into the world.
Yeah.
It says, well, the which would it be could be the universe or the character.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I thought you meant like which
Stephanie,
world would you
write
be
your
as a
question,
character?
Yeah. So I thought, I had a hard time with this one too because I would think about, Well, it'd be cool to live in Conan's world, except no, it wouldn't.
No,
It's
no.
horrible. Everyone gets murdered, right? Well, I could be with the X-Men, but I've read X-Men books, and there's a lot of people dying in all of those books.
And it's all the comic book universe.
Right. So I was like, where would my little soft snowflake self, get to exist without murder happening?
You snowflake.
And I, like, maybe the Archieverse? Like, I can deal with
no, I got
I'm
this
joking.
one.
I'm
I got
joking.
this one.
I'm joking.
The afterlife of the Archieverse, right? That's what you really mean.
The Smurfs. It's all dudes. One chick decorates the place.
With a giant
It's
hunting
hot.
you down.
And
Strawberry
to eat you.
shortcake.
No, it's too many women. It's all dudes. with the Smurfs.
The numbers game would work.
No
for me.
shirts.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
become
no
the
shirts.
Little hats.
There's
tidy
obvious.
whities.
There's obvious at least a few gay Smurfs.
At least
I mean, Fancy Smurf exists, and Caleb would hate it.
I mean, in reality, like, I'm a Marvel kid, so I would love to be in the Marvel universe. But I think if I got to choose who I got to kick it with, man, I really love Kelly Thompson's her last run. I call it the Young Avengers, but it was
Champions.
West Coast.
Oh,
West Coast
yeah.
Avengers. All of those kids are cool. Yes, like, there's land sharks, but I could just, like, stay in the building.
Did you see the backup story in Avengers that had 2 pages of West Coast Avengers?
I might have missed that. Yeah.
At the end of Avengers 22.
I'll have to go back
Just
and
point
check
that
that
out.
I read it, so I just missed that part, I guess, or overlooked it, or didn't realize what it was.
Because it said to be concluded or
Right.
something, and then the next, when you flip the page, you think it's probably
I probably
title
closed
page.
the book. Yeah, I probably closed the book. Yeah, but I'd kick it with the West Coast, like Kelly Thompson's West Coast Avengers.
Yeah, it was
that
a lot of
seems
fun. Yeah.
With the caveat that I need Wiccan and Hulkling to be a part of that group, just to make it fun, because it is the fucking Young Avengers.
Right.
Yeah, it'd be good times. I just don't want to die. Like, everybody who seems to be anybody. Like, if I don't get a name, I die. That's just not.
Well, you
that's
don't want to
not
be a
okay.
red shirt in any universe or a stormtrooper.
Maybe did they ever make a Deep Space Nine comic? I'd be on that one.
I'm sure they did.
I'd drink with the Ferengi all day. That seems fun. Let's see. Frankie De Jesus says that he loved the previous funeral music question. I think that came from Bill Zanowitz. And the answers that we gave. And he wants to turn it around. What music or song best represents you now being alive? This is a really good question. Well, I think we all listen to a lot of music. And like, the funeral question is always easy because it's got some meaning. But what song represents how you exist today? Craig.
I'll go first because it's going to piss Matt off because I have 3 answers. So first of all, he said music or song.
Mm-hmm.
Metal is my genre, so it's going to be metal. And the songs generally vary from what's going on in my life, but the first song that came to my mind, which might annoy you a little bit, Caleb, is Five Finger Death Punch, Far From Home.
Yeah, I'll piggyback
I thought you said
that.
metal was your genre.
I'll
Yeah.
piggyback that groan.
The reason why is this song reminds me of my life on the carnival, you fuckers. Do you feel bad now?
It should. It fucking should.
Or Shinedown's Misfits, because somehow a song about being a misfit always seems to fit. So, I mean, sorry, we can't all pick, thrash metal.
What do you mean you can't?
I said we all can't.
Yeah. What do you mean?
All right, now that Matt's pissed, ask him his.
Matt, what song best represents you being alive?
So at first I thought, well, I'm going to have to pick a song that's instrumental because, the lyrics of any song are going to be so specific. But I thought, well, that's too easy of an out. So I'll piggyback your cheat there, Craig. Because at first I was like, I'll actually type
What,
out
you're
everything.
picking 2?
Yeah, of course I am. So at first I picked Into the Lungs of Hell by Megadeth.
Uh-huh.
There's it's just instrumental. And I was like, this is it. And I was like, well, no. I thought, it's taking the easy way out. So Fucking Hostile by Pantera is what I chose. As far as, reading the question, best represents you now alive. Because that song is all about authority figures pissing you off, and I have a strong dislike for authority figures. So
Go figure.
Yeah. So that's the one I picked. At any given moment, that's going to be my mood at any given moment. Unless I'm sleeping.
You I imagine you're very peaceful when you're asleep. Or do you dream in hate?
That's when his wife looks at him and goes, he's so cute when he's sleeping.
No, she doesn't say that.
Sean, buddy, what song best represents you?
I had a pretty hard time trying to narrow it down, and I wasn't going to pick three
So
answers.
tell us all three of them.
I know, right? Actually, no, I only have one because I asked my wife instead about what song does she think represents me.
That's a good way to do it. Yeah.
She picked Shimmy Shimmy Ya by the Old Dirty Bastard.
Okay.
Weird, sporadic, and oddly enjoyable. I think that summarizes me.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
I too had a difficult time with this question because I feel like there are so many great songs that represent who I am as a person. It's got to have really great catchy lyrics.
You went with Tapeworm by System of a Down.
No.
Toxicity.
If you have it, blasting on the radio, it needs to make people turn their heads and say, "What the fuck?" And it's got to be very sexy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I actually went with A Thing Called Love by The Darkness.
There you go.
Off their 2003
It does
album,
make people turn
Permission
their
to
head and
Land.
look.
I thought he was going to say "sexy motherfucker." My friends.
I also had The Humpty Dance by Digital Underground.
Yeah.
That's the song. my wife
Raise Your
would've told
Glass
me
by
to pick.
Pink was on there, and High Voltage by Electric Six.
Okay, Jerry did 5.
That was 4. That was only 4.
Oh, was it 4? Okay.
Okay, give us your top 10 list.
I just saw it. Actually, I just saw Jerry's page. He marked out "pussy control."
and Raspberry Beret.
I could have gone so much.
There was a certain Korn song that I thought about going with, but I'm not, because I'm not going to say that word on the air. Obviously, you know me. I love very coupley, so I went with Two Sparrows and a Hurricane by Tanya Tucker. No, I'm joking. I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Let me tell you about Two Sparrows and a Hurricane. They're fucking dead.
No, dude. There is a song, and it's a weird. So I'm a weird mix of gay, redneck, and metal. What? Like, I don't know why. Like, again, I got called a rainbow redneck last week, and that was hilarious to me. But there's really only one person that I can think of that really encompasses all three of those things, and he wrote a song that, I'm eventually going to get a tattoo that describes the song, and to me it throws back to a relationship with my brother Jib that passed away a few years ago, and that is 3 Shades of Black by Hank 3. 3 Shades of Black is where we come from. Depression, misery, and hellacious fun. We all like metal and whiskey, working hard and chasing down hell. Like the lyrics of that song really hit with me. It's a little bit metal, it's a little bit country, it's a little bit deviance, and I'm all about it. Like, that's me.
None of us picked A Country Boy Can Survive.
As well, we shouldn't. Let's leave Hank Jr. out of this. We're talking about Hank 3.
When I think of Caleb, I always think of that song that he requested at the piano bar that they had to wait and study up on the lyrics before. What was the name?
I don't know. It's probably a Dr. Hook song.
I don't remember.
Dr. Hook.
The really like vapid rap song.
Oh, it was Easy E song.
Yeah,
that's
yes.
not a vapid rap song. It's fucking Easy E.
Yeah.
You go wash your mouth out.
True.
Damn, he's just
Uncultured swine.
give us some of those lyrics.
woke up quick at about noon. Just thought that I had to be in Compton soon. I got to get drunk before the day begins. Before my mom starts bitching about my friends. There we go. That's all. That's all you get from me. Come see me on the
Is it the
weekends
one
at
where you
White
reach
Boy
back
Rapper.
and slap the hoe?
Yeah, he
Oh,
reaches
yeah.
back like a
Boys
pimp and
in the
slaps
hood.
the hoe.
Because the boys in the hood are always hard.
I don't condone slapping anyone or the reference of women of hoes. We'll leave that alone. That was a different time. But no, dude. Yeah, 3 Shades of Black, Hank 3. That would be mine. If you haven't listened to that song, you should. It's great. If you were to reboot the DC cinematic universe and not use the Trinity, which is smart, what character would you use and who would play that role? And this comes from Mr. Robert Hafferman, a man of which I have much respect. I love that guy. He's great. He's a fantastic artist, by the way. Rob, if you're listening, keep up the good work, dude. You're killing it. Just those self-portraits are fantastic. I'll start this one off. I don't think I've started one off yet. My answer is Green Lantern. So technically it's only one answer. It is
But he's going to give us all 4 people.
No, but I honestly, and that's because, again, we're leaving the Trinity alone, but I do think you have to have a character that ties into those. I don't know if I would rather see it be a Jon Stewart Green Lantern or if a Kyle Rayner Green Lantern. Kyle's my favorite Green Lantern. I love
You're
that.
right. It should be Guy Gardner.
No, no one wants that.
Kilowog.
Look,
Of course you do.
I don't know if you've paid attention to the Matt websites, but we're not doing gingers now.
Well, if we
replacement theory.
do Guy Gardner, it's going to be a black man.
Yeah, it's got to be because ginger replacement.
He'll be
theory.
called Guy Gardner, but it's still Jon Stewart.
If it was going to be Jon Stewart, there is an actor. His name is Trevante Rhodes. He played in Moonlight. He's a fantastic actor. I think he would crush it in that role. If it was going to be Kyle Rayner, I went with Tyler Posey from Teen Wolf, which is weird because he's not really a film actor. He's more of a television actor, but he's Latinx, which, Kyle Rayner is also, a lot of people forget that. He is a Latinx character, and I do think that if you're going to cast, Latinx characters, you should cast Latinx actors and so on and so forth. So I went with that. But I think the Green Lantern is a good place because at that point the scope of what you can do is broad, but it's both high concept and street level. And I think that's a great place to kick off the DC universe. What you got, Craig?
I also went Green Lantern.
Goddamn right you did.
But I went with Ian Somerhalder as Hal Jordan.
Nice.
Older version. Just dye his hair blonde.
Who is that? Who's he?
He's you wouldn't know. He's from he's from the Vampire Diaries. He was on Lost. He's no one you would know.
He's my pick to play Namor.
Yeah, he'd make a good Namor too.
Also to do other things with.
I'm sure he is. I'm straight and he's gorgeous.
Yeah, right.
I picked Green Lantern too.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
I was going to. I was very close.
I thought you were going to pick
it. I actually picked a Blue and Gold movie, Booster Gold, Blue Beetle.
Oh, okay.
And I picked Nathan Fillion and Neil Patrick Harris.
That would be an interesting combination. It would be great, but it would be an interesting place to reboot the DC universe with.
We're going full on.
I just want to see Booster Gold go, the hammer is not my penis.
Yes.
The only thing I know.
Suit up.
What you got, Matt?
So I picked The Question.
Okay.
My thinking was if we're starting the slate clean with the DCU, start at the ground with a compelling ground level character and build up from there. So bring in, after you establish the Question, you started with a question, question movie, and then at the end of the movie or post credit scenes, then you start bringing in the bigger, more powerful characters, within the DCU. An actor to play the Question? I have no fucking idea.
Doesn't matter.
I don't keep track with really actors. If an actor is younger than 50 years old, I probably have no idea who they are.
It's actually kind of funny because
get off his lawn.
One of in kind of segue back into one of our other topics earlier of tie-ins and everything. Convergence had a really great one that was Blue Beetle, and it actually gave me the great team that is technically the Watchmen. And it was Blue Beetle, Captain Atom, and The Question. And I was originally going to put that in there, but I didn't want to think of actors for.
So what he's going to do is give all of his answers after every one of us answers. He's going to say that was going to be my answer.
What if Henry Rollins played The Question?
It's too old. That's the thing is,
Under the mask, it doesn't matter.
I couldn't think.
Got to have a good voice.
Yeah.
What about Hugo Weaving?
Yeah.
I thought about that. I thought about Hugo Weaving because his mannerisms would be killer, but he's too old.
But it's a mask.
Keep the mask on the entire
it doesn't
time,
stay
Dread
on the whole
style.
time.
It did on.
Or
he
V
is
for
one that
Vendetta.
will do it. He did it in V for Vendetta.
Yep.
Never took it off.
Fine.
Sean
broke that.
Well, DC is just die hard to keep making their shit dark as hell, so I'm going to go ahead and embrace that. I'm going to start off with Constantine.
Okay.
Starring Taron Egerton from The Kingsman and recently Rocketman. I think he could pull off John Constantine very well. It'll start off just, and of course we'll get the dark universe that Universal can't seem to fucking pull off. But, we'll start off with him just solving mysteries. And as he does, deal with the supernatural, we'll get introduced to more of the supernatural elements of the DC universe. And I would say we'll start off with the Demon Etrigan to really kick it off.
That'd be a good one.
Noel just squeed somewhere.
Yeah.
I know now.
I likes it. Favorite comic book origin story. Doesn't have to be written, best written or best character, just talking about the idea or concept. This comes from our buddy, Mr. Patrick DeLira. Sean, go ahead. Since you finished that last one, we'll serpentine it. You go first.
This should surprise nobody. Harley Quinn.
Okay.
Just the most popular case of Stockholm Syndrome in comics. I mean, how a psychiatrist can fall in love with her patient and go so far as to become a career criminal. Tragic and endearing. I think her origin is a big part of why she's become popular with so many people over the years.
Craig.
I went with X-23, Laura.
That's a good one.
I was going to go with Logan, but I went with her because hers is actually more metal than Logan, in my opinion. She was cloned from him, and then they trained her to be a killer using a scent, triggering scent. And when her mother, Sarah Kinney, helped her escape, they actually sprayed Sarah with the scent, and she went and killed her. Yeah.
You said you were going to go with Logan. Which specific story?
That's why I went with yeah.
You said you were considering.
I was
Logan.
considering it.
But which Logan's origin story?
Well, that was part of the problem. Is there's so many and it's so convoluted that
Because
I didn't want to.
You would pick that X-23 origin story over Marvel Comics Presents Weapon X, done by Barry Windsor Smith.
In this case, yes.
God damn it!
Shots fired.
Did you hear me? She killed her own mother and sat there in a pool of her blood.
She wouldn't even be around if it wasn't for Logan.
Matt.
Quit trying to shoehorn Wolverine.
Technically, her origin is his.
It gets grandfathered in. You're terrible, Matt. You're terrible. Stop it. Jerry, what's your origin story?
I actually picked Flash Thompson as Venom.
Okay.
It's just such a huge turnaround for a character because he was Peter Parker's bully in high school, but he idolized Spider-Man. He had an abusive father at home, and he went off to war, lost his legs, and basically was following the same path as his father, becoming a drunk and an alcoholic, and got a second chance at life with the Venom symbiote, and used that to become a hero as best as he could.
Right. All right, Matt. Is it Weapon X by Barry Windsor Smith?
Man, I struggled with this so bad. As much as I love that story, I had to choose Batman Year One.
Okay.
The reason is because the story itself of Batman Year One is just a little bit more compelling than the Weapon X Barry Windsor Smith, just barely. And it's really one part of it when he escapes the building from the SWAT team with no gizmos is amazing. And it just tops the Weapon X story for me.
Where was Superman Year One on your list?
Hey, bro, there was no Year One. Did you notice?
I struggled with this one too because there's a lot of great ones out there. Look, if you want all over the place. We're sitting, the wall behind us is all independent books, and there's a ton of great origin stories from those too. But ultimately, I had to go with the origin story of my favorite character, which is the Hulk. It's the story of self-sacrifice. It's the story of
It's pretty metal too.
Yeah, it teaches you that you have a responsibility to think of your actions ethically. He made the bomb that ultimately destroyed him. There's a lot of literary context with the story of Frankenstein, with the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He runs out to save Rick from a mistake that he made. And he had no idea. He thought he was going to die. So, he had no idea it was going to turn him into some type of amorphic monster. He just thought it was going to kill him. But he wanted to save this boy who stumbled out onto a bomb testing range. It was that immediacy of knowing that what he did was going to end life. It's kind of a fuck you to the military complex we have here, which is what I think Stan wanted it to be. And so, yeah, I went with that one. And it's gone a lot of places since then, but ultimately, I have to go with that one too. It's a beautiful story that gave way to many of my characters. there's a lot of things you can learn from it. I think
there aren't very many beautiful origin stories.
I think Wiccan's is beautiful. If I was going to think of an origin story of Wiccan, to be birthed out of chaos magic from the grief of your mother and to not have a place, to literally be the ultimate mistake. And have your mother not recognize you as a child, there's a lot of beauty in that story.
Yeah, that sounds beautiful.
I think the Weapon X story was beautiful.
I think the X-20, she sat in a pool of her mother, and I'm using quotations, blood. How is that not?
Harley's origin is about love.
They put Wolverine out into the snow with no clothes, set him up against a bear, and he made short work of it.
Conan's mama gave birth to him on a battlefield while stabbing other people. There's nothing more beautiful than that. All right. What comic book that isn't a video game would you like to see made into a video game, and why? And this also comes from Miss Stephanie Straw. Which is a great question. It was interesting to me because I had to go look up what has become video games because I generally don't care about video games. I just don't have time to play them. I went with East of West by Hickman and Dragata. Like you could do it like the Telltale thing. It doesn't necessarily have to follow one character around. You could be you could be Death. You could be the kid. You could be anybody, and just follow them around. I think it'd be fun. It's a big, unique, kind of weird world that I think would look great on the screen.
For sure.
We'll go with you next, Matt.
Oh, sorry, Caleb. The correct answer.
Mario was made into a video game.
The correct answer is Savage Sword of Conan.
Okay. But hasn't Conan been a video game?
Several.
Conan has a video game.
Savage
Several
Sword of Conan is the correct answer.
Jerry.
I actually went with a Green Lantern Corps video game.
Okay.
Not where you play as one of the main characters, but you make your own, and you're just now inducted into the Green Lantern Corps, and give it a thing of like character customization and interesting ways to do the powers and everything, and going out to the space. And,
Green Lantern with a Harry Potter twist. That's awesome.
Yep.
Nice. What you got, Craig?
I went with Saga.
Okay.
It's a huge, expansive universe. You can play good or evil. You can play a bounty hunter, mercenary hunting down Hazel. You can play somebody trying to protect her from getting captured by the governments that are after her, that sort of thing. So that's what I went with.
Nice. I went with the manga Gantz. Imagine an open world style game where a group of players have to hunt down a ridiculously high level difficulty alien monster. If you win, you progress, you get upgrades, all that. But the big factor for this one is permadeath on your character. Like if you die, you got to recreate. You start from scratch no matter how high up level you got, because Gantz is very much a lot of people die.
It could be one of those things too where you have to like also keep the people that you're with alive.
Right. I mean, you want to work together because it's not something you're ever going to solo, big gun your way through. So,
and it would be made by the people that made Dark Souls.
Yes. Yeah.
I was going to say, I already hate it because I hate having to team up with other people to play video games.
We got time for one more, right? I think so. What never completed comic series or run would you like to bring back and have finished? And would you like the same creative team on it? And that's also Mr. Frankie De Jesus. He dropped a few questions on us. Him and Stephanie both did. I said Morning Glories on this one. So, which is a weird thing. It's a weird argument because the creators of Morning Glories, which is Nick Spencer and Joe Eisma, they would argue that the story is over, that it finished at 50. The original plan for that run was 100 issues, and it was going to be what they called 4 seasons. They finished it at issue 50 with season 2. And then they just didn't pick it back up, and they would argue that it's over, but if you read it, it very much leaves on a cliffhanger. There absolutely was more story to be told, and I love what I read, so I want them to come back and finish it, and I don't buy that it's over.
Joe Eisma gets asked all the time, when are you guys going to finish this story? And his answer is always, I don't know when it's coming back, leave me alone.
Yeah.
I mean, he will post art on his Facebook page from it. Hey, I found this art from when I was doing Morning Glories. Don't ask me when it's restarting because I don't know.
Yeah, I would love them if they would come back and finish that. Sean?
I chose a book called Bayou. I don't think a lot of people have heard of this one. It was originally published by Zuda, and then DC did the second volume. It's by Jeremy Love. It's a story set in 1930 Mississippi, a Jim Crow era Alice in Wonderland tale dealing with like violence and racism of the era. Really damn good book that just got, like I said, 2 collected volumes, and then it just ended. I don't know what Jeremy Love is doing anymore, but I really wish she would get back on it. As well as does my wife, because these are actually one of the first things I bought her when we started dating.
Okay.
So would love to see the story continue, but don't know why it ended. Haven't heard anything. Can't find what he's even doing anymore.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Jerry?
Cowboy Ninja Viking by A.J. Lieberman and Riley Rossmo.
Mm-hmm.
It started off as a mini-series, and then they were supposed to get an ongoing, and then it stopped at like 12 issues.
Yeah.
And it was a fantastic series. The art, the color palettes that they used in it was amazing. It was my first introduction into Riley Rossmo. The synopsis of it was essentially there was this government experiment to make the perfect assassin, and they pretty much conditioned these people to have 3 different personalities, and they called them the triplets. And it failed because they only had 2 successful triplets in it. The rest of them kind of had sort of like at least one weird personality in there. So the main character, for instance, he had the three personalities that he had was the cowboy, ninja, the Viking. The other success in it was his brother, who had an army staff sergeant, an Apache Indian, and a Scottish Highlander.
Yeah.
They had some great and wacky combinations. One of my favorite ones was this character named Steed Malbronk. He had a hitman, Navy SEAL, and a roadie for Dawkin in it. It was very great. They had another character that was really like kind of, I don't know, he was kind of scary just based off of appearance alone, but he was a demo expert, an army captain, and Amish.
Yeah.
So that's a personality.
Weaponized schizophrenia.
Yeah. But it was a fantastic series, and I really would love some more of it. They've been toying with the idea of having Chris Pratt star in a movie of it for a while. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, though, but I would be all for anything that I can get from that series.
Yeah, it's Riley Rossmo. I'm on board.
Yeah.
What you got for us, Craig?
I went with Miracle Man, Silver Age. Finished that.
Okay.
During the publication of Miracle Man, I forget who published it now, Eclipse, their publishing offices got flooded, and the last half of the story arc was lost, and then they went out of business.
Yeah.
Marvel republished everything, all the Golden Age and Silver Age that was completed a few years back, and then Neil Gaiman was supposed to finish the Silver Age. But I would love to see Neil Gaiman's ending to the Silver Age section of Miracle Man, and then, of course, go on and do the Bronze Age and the Modern Age. And you could have the whole point was to have different writers doing different ages of it. So, yeah, I'd like to see Miracle Man finished by Neil Gaiman, the Silver Age finished by Neil Gaiman, and then two new writers to finish the other.
Nice. What you got for us, Matt?
This was super easy for me. I picked Image Comics Fell by Warren Ellis and Ben Temple-Smith. That was a fantastic street level crime series. And the only reason they didn't...
What? You liked a street level crime series? I'm so shocked.
By Warren Ellis. And it was dynamite. And but it
You just said it was Image.
It was
Jerry and I went to the same place. We're gonna get punched.
What a miss.
You said it was dynamite after you said it was Image.
Oh, Christ.
We should be worried because he has two fists. So.
He's two-punch man.
Dude, I love Ben Temple-Smith.
Yeah.
I love Ben Temple-Smith's work.
Yeah, the only reason it wasn't completed is because something went kooky with Warren Ellis's laptop, and he was so pissed he just said, fuck this, and went on to other things.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. Can't blame him.
I can relate to that in the best way. Well, all right. Those were good questions. Great questions all around. I would like to invite you to come to our Facebook group and drop us more, because in about a month, we're going to do this all over again. We're going to get some new questions, some fresh questions. If
we might just do news twice next month.
Yeah, just to screw that. If we dropped us a question and we didn't get to it, it's still on the queue. We're going to get around to it at some point. Some of y'all dropped a whole bunch of questions, and we had to spread the love around a little bit, just to cover everybody. We're trying to be all-encompassing. We're inviting peaceful, calm, friendship, all that shit.
That is not what I think of when I think of any of us.
No, at all.
Maybe Jerry.
I didn't sign up for that.
So at the end of every episode, we like to give you guys just a brief little suggestion. We like to set the menu for next week, let you know what's going to be on the table, to give you some ideas of some books you might want to pick out if you weren't already signed up for them, or if you are, then you're already set. But just to let you know, it is coming out next week. I'm going to go first on this one because for the last 2 weeks, the book I picked has been picked by somebody else. And I really want to do this one. I really want to do it first, and that is Berserker Unbound. It's coming out next week. I'm really excited about this book.
This close.
Almost picked it.
This book is going to be amazing for several reasons. Mainly because it's Jeff Lemire and Mike Deodato Jr. It kind of plays on the idea of a Conan-esque type figure jumping up into modern times and being like unleashed in, I think, Manhattan. Or
it's like Conan but interesting.
You son of a bitch.
Get out. Leave. I expel you. You're done.
Expelorama.
Fucking rash is gone.
I just lost my entire train of thought and developed a whole new level of hate in my heart. Yeah, go get Berserker Unbound. Fucking asshole. Sean, make it better.
I'm looking forward to a book called Coffin Bound from Image Comics. Thank you, welcome, Craig. Written by Dan Waters, art by someone who just goes by Danny. Cars, guns, and entropy. Chased by unstoppable killer Izzy Tybran has decided that if the world won't have her in it, it can have nothing of her at all. She's retreading her life, leaving nothing but burned rubber, ash, and sun-scorched bones of those who get in her way. Sounds like pretty damn interesting. Apparently, Craig agrees.
I'm looking for something else.
Right.
Jerry, tell us what uninteresting book you're going to talk about.
Probably one of my favorite series that started up this year is Die. Mm-hmm. Die number 6. The second volume starts up this week by Kieran Gillian and Stephanie Hans. They split the party at the end of the last story arc. Mm-hmm. And
that always works out well.
Never split the party.
And they can literally only leave if they all agree to it, or if, whoever doesn't want to leave dies. So it's going to be very interesting where the story goes from here. It's just, I don't know. I've been awed in everything that's been going on in this series.
I've got nothing snarky to say about this because it's a fantastic book, and I support the things you like, Jerry.
Oh, nice.
That is hard to say, man, isn't it?
He threw up a little in his mouth.
It tastes so bad. What you got this week, Matt?
So I'm looking forward to Dead Man Logan number 10 by Ed Brisson and Mike Henderson. Facing off against, Logan at the end of his life is once again facing off against Sabretooth, and I love seeing the Sabretooth versus Logan thing. All you people need to pay attention that keep writing team-ups between Sabretooth and Logan, you sick assholes. So I'm looking forward to see how Ed Brisson does it.
I'm going to go with Death-Defying Devil number 1.
Yeah.
Gail Simone, Walter Giovanni, and Riccardo Federici. Matt actually made me aware of this book last week. I really don't know much about it, so I'm just going to read the synopsis. Winslow House is in shambles, but people call it home. It's a place for people who have almost nothing but are trying to make a life for themselves. It is also a bad neighborhood, and no one will stop criminals from tormenting the residents until the death-defying devil shows up.
Have you never read any of the Project Superpowers?
No.
Stuff? Oh, it spins out of that.
Does it? Okay.
Yeah, it's fantastic stuff. It was on my short list in case I decided not to go first, and somebody picked my book. Because that happens.
I almost had that one.
I'm gonna have to. Well, I'm gonna have to start making multiple lists now.
All right. We ready to bring this thing home?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, let's do it because I got to get to work. We really hope you've enjoyed our show. We would like to invite you to come back again next Sunday and listen to more. We're going to be talking about comics, just a whole heap of comics next week, and it's going to be good times all around. If you want to get in touch with us, there's a couple of ways. You know how you do it? I'm going to tell you how you do it. You go on our Facebook page, or you go on Facebook. And
I wrote a song about it. You want to hear it? Here it goes.
Yeah, here it goes.
Here it goes.
And you join our Facebook group, and you become one of the almost 200 people now who have jumped on there. Now, I do want to throw some shade. We've got almost 200 people on our Facebook group. We're only getting about 100 downloads to each episode, so about 100 of y'all need to step the fuck up. Wag my finger at you. We're at 50%, and that's not okay. I have angst and grief about it. I need you to do better. But if you're listening to this episode, it's not really doing any good because you're doing your job, and we really appreciate that. You can also go on our Twitter page and our Instagram page. We're at SFG Podcast on both of those. And if you got any comments, complaints, if you want to talk about how Conan's never been boring and Jerry's strong a lot, you can shoot us an email at southernfriedgeekery@gmail.com. I'll forward it to Jerry so he can see your words because he needs to. He's earned it. He's wronged. He's sinned in the eyes of crime. And if we got nothing else, go forth and love some comics. Woo! There we go. Bye, guys.